welcome to the call this week. Today, my guest is Marty Britton. Marty is the president and a CEO at Britton Management Profile Inc. And, among the many business owners deal with many important things. And one of the important things, we all deal with this, we're hiring people. And we all made a mistake. I personally made so many mistakes hiring people. And I'm looking forward to my discussion with Marty to learn all about how to avoid some of those mistakes I've been making. Thank you so much for joining me, Marty, in the call today.
Good morning, Gurmeet. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I'm so happy to have this opportunity to chat with you.
Thank you. So tell us a little bit about the Britton, your organization. What do you guys do, and how do you guys solve, some of the business problems that we chatted about, and how it all got started?
Absolutely. So our job is to make sure you know who you're hiring, because sadly, a number of job candidates misrepresent themselves. And that number is actually quite high. It's 78% of job candidates will misrepresent themselves. And to an employer, that cost is huge. It costs you typically 213% of a salary to replace somebody.
Wow.
So think about that, Gurmeet. If you've got you're paying an employee $100,000 a year and you find out that they misrepresented themselves, you're now going to come up with a $213,000 price tag to replace them. So it is really important to know who you're hiring.
That's a big number.
Yeah.
So walk us through a little bit on the background. How do you get started? And how what do you guys primarily do? Do you guys do a reference check? What do you guys primarily do in your organization, Marty? You guys been in business for a long time. Looks like your dad started before you, and if you can walk us through the journey. What changes you saw in the market even before COVID, and how we got here?
Absolutely. So yes, my father founded the business in 1974. Okay. You have to think way back in time to what the world was like at that point.
Yeah.
And the big thing there, we started as an investigative reference checking company.
Okay.
Because you think back to the 70s, consent wasn't really a thing. So our job was to go into companies and find references who would report on people. So it was kind of an investigative style. So, you couldn't do that today, but we would look at somebody's resume, which was kind of weird. And you would go back to all the companies where they worked. You would start by calling their personnel department, because HR wasn't a thing in the early 70s. It was personnel. And we would just ask who could we speak to, who that person reported to. And people would freely give you information. Again, you could not do that today, but that's how it was kind of started, as an investigative reference checking company. And that kind of became our brand at that point. And today, reference checking is still our main product offering. It's what we kind of do the most of. We do it obviously different today. You have to give consent, but that kind of led into reference checking being our main product offering, how we started this.
See, so is it only a reference checking, or it looks like you guys do a lot more than reference checking? Is it a reference or credit checking? How far do we go to find out what is people who are applying for jobs?
Yeah, it's really evolved. It's really evolved, and it's funny. It's been big changes in the world that has kind of been our tipping point. So reference checking is, as I said, that's our main thing. Then clients started to ask us to verify education, because that's where the number, of people misrepresenting themselves is really great. So, someone I'll look at a resume and they'll say Bachelor of Arts degree or Bachelor of Arts, and I know that they didn't get the degree. So that's where we find a large percentage of the misrepresentation is in things like education. So we started doing education verifications. Employment verifications, same thing. That's where a large number of people misrepresent themselves. So it's really, really super important that you actually call up the HR department. You don't get an employment verification from a reference, because the reference isn't actually confirming factual information. So it's super important to call up the HR department and find out specifics on their employment, dates of employment, title, and reason for leaving. That's what you're confirming. And again, Gurmeet, you do not want to get that information from a reference. You get that from the HR department.
Yeah, how often people use references, their friends, and sometimes, their colleagues in a team, very often that happens, right?
You're correct on that. And one of the things that we ask when we're talking to the references to try to qualify that they're legitimate references and not planted references is we ask them to verify information on exactly what the candidate did for them in terms of specific details to kind of make sure that the resume or their LinkedIn profile matches what they said they did. So that's kind of really important.
And I, during my recruiting process, I, find this is the most time consuming process, right? So, verifying information that presented to you, yeah, you take that as a face value that, hey, that's what it should be, from, but verifying the information is so critical, and very seldom the business owners have that, or HR leaders have that much time to verify the information. So important what you do. So in a HR process, where does this come up? This steps comes in. Do the companies first find out who they want to hire, then they verify information, or they first verify information, then they go through the interview process and start talking to people?
What a lot of companies do is that they actually, before they get to the interviewing stage, they'll start to do a background check on the person, because it's a fairly inexpensive thing to do. And hiring, as you know, is very expensive. So you don't want to go down too far down that road to find out that something's not legitimate. So a lot of companies will do it at kind of the very beginning of the job process. They'll run a background check, and then they can go through the rest of the processes to make sure that everything is legit. So I would recommend that they kind of do that at the beginning stage. Don't wait till you're ready to onboard somebody, because now all your HR team has spent a ton of time interviewing people and doing all kinds of things. Then you find out, oh, wait, the criminal background check didn't come back clear. Or, oh, the education isn't legit. Now you've just wasted all that time. So most companies do it kind of at the early stage of the recruiting process. That's the best time to do it.
I see. So during the COVID, a lot has changed. When you see the changes in your space, Marty, is the hiring process changed? What has changed? Because people, all of a sudden got very important. Health and safety came in, and many other items. So what do you see the major changes on your space?
Yeah, COVID's changed things greatly. I think a bigger change though before COVID was 9/11. If we can kind of all sort of think back to that time, what the world was like before 9/11. And that really changed the world in so many ways. But before 9/11, companies would never even ever think of doing a criminal record check. But now just about everybody does a criminal record check. And the reason for that is because of 9/11. People became concerned about who they were hiring, because do we actually really know who we're hiring? So 9/11 changed the whole recruiting process in a really big way. And again, that was criminal checks that came in, and that was the big thing then. COVID, how I see the big changes now is it's still really super important to do your background checks, but now we've just launched a new identity verification product that I think will be critical for hiring remotely, because how do I know that who you say you are? Obviously, we can do the rest of the background checking, but with identity theft today, and that's happening more and more and more, especially with all the stuff that we're doing online, identity theft's becoming a big deal. So we've launched a facial recognition tool that actually, as part of the onboarding and going through the background check with the criminal credit references, that sort of thing, they actually have to take a picture of themselves, a selfie of their ID, and then a picture of themselves, and then the two matches, and it makes sure that John Doe really is John Doe. So I think that's going to be our big takeaway from COVID, will be making sure that person is not just on paper who they say they are, like verifying the education, employment, that sort of thing, criminal credit, but actually making sure that they are, in fact, a real person.
Yeah, that is so important, especially when a COVID, when you're hiring remotely. You're not sitting with the person in front of in a boardroom. You try to hire over the Zoom calls or team meetings. Verifying that information. You don't have all that to verify during the call. You definitely need to go back and verify a lot of information.
Absolutely. So it's become a lot more complicated. And also, I think it's important too, because we're hiring, we're no longer hiring within our geographical space. We're hiring, we can hire anywhere now. We can hire from the US. We can hire from Europe. So that's kind of cool in some regards. However, that poses a problem as an employer, again, going back to making sure you know who you're hiring.
Yeah.
So we are a global company. So if you're going to be hiring somebody from the US, it's important to make sure that you actually check their criminal record in the US, do that due diligence there. And if they're coming from Europe, then you have to make sure that you're checking those credentials from Europe as well. So that's really important. I think we'll see more and more of that moving forward after COVID, because we can hire differently now. We don't physically have people sitting in our offices like we used to. I think we'll come back to that. But to what extent, I'm really not sure
Mhm.
if, I mean, I think some people will come back, but there'll still be a large contingent of people who will be working remotely, I think,
Mhm.
indefinitely.
Yeah, a lot of business leaders, like, among myself as well, we all, thinking, well, we don't need to be in office anymore. We can work remotely from home and we can get work done. And we don't have to travel to office, save a lot of time. But one step further to that, a business leader thinking, well, if they can be home here in Ontario, could they be at home some other part of the country? Could they be in
Exactly.
other part of the country? So, they start thinking, hey, how could I lower costs? Maybe this is a cost, controlling opportunity that, instead of, having somebody in Ontario, maybe I can outsource to different countries. A lot of companies I see that they're providing that kind of services as well. In that regard, I think checking that, what you're providing is so critical that you're making sure that somebody's representing the work you do is right. These are right people.
Absolutely, because we're going to have a global, workforce now. It'll be so much easier after COVID, and I think gradually over time, I mean, that will stay like that. I think indefinitely. I don't think we'll ever go back to the way it was that we needed to feel that we had to have office space. We still physically have office space here, and we need to come in because we're a background checking company,
Mhm.
and we have to protect sensitive information. So we're just not comfortable having people working from home. But a lot of companies absolutely can just work remotely. And I think that's going to really make, really ensure that you're doing the proper due diligence before you bring them on, making sure they say who they are really is important.
So talking about digital economy, I think is one of the things COVID did is push that digital, economy a little bit further that it was before COVID, so social media is one of the important aspects in this economy. I made mistakes in the past as well, where if I want to verify the only places I have, I look at social media. Hey, is that person saying what it is? That the person who it is? What are your thoughts on that in social media, checking as employers like myself, that those are the only tools we have to verify some information.
And that's very true. Everybody automatically goes to social media. But here's my one big concern about that. You as an employer want to make a hire, you're going to go to social media.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be careful because once you've seen something, you can't unsee it.
Okay.
You have to think about that. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And how do you know that you're actually looking at the right person? And a lot of times there are serial sewers out there who will put a lot of content out there or whatever. So you have to really, really be careful. So what we recommend to our clients in terms of social media, do not look at it. Obviously, LinkedIn's a different platform. Everybody's going to look at, you can look at, people you want to hire, their LinkedIn profile. That's a whole different platform altogether. So I recommend you as a potential employer wanting to hire someone, look at their LinkedIn profile. But that's where it needs to stop. So what we do with our clients is when they're onboarding somebody, we'll run a social media check. We have software that actually runs through all the algorithms. It goes into the deeper dives of the archives where you would spend hours and days to get to. So we do an extensive search. Let's say we're looking for John Doe. Yeah. We put in that name in the search engine. It goes through, pulls up all kinds of information on John Doe. Now it goes through a manual process. A human process has to touch it to make sure that we have the right John Doe. And when we think we have the right John Doe, then we run that name and information, address, and through the software again. And we keep extracting information until we're absolutely sure we have the person. And then we put that into a report to our client. So what they're looking for in terms of that when we're running a social media check is we're looking at their language, their tone. Are they talking disrespectfully about an employer? Do you want that person to come into your work culture if that's the case? So that's why we're finding more and more clients today are starting to do social media checks. Just to make sure that person, that they can actually see what they're posting. They're positive people. They're not toxic. Once you get somebody in, as you know, we talked about the cost. It's 213% of their salary to replace an employee. So you really have to do your due diligence. So that's why we recommend the social media check. And we also recommend that you as an employer, other than looking at their LinkedIn, do not start diving into that archives. The other thing too, it's a rabbit hole. My God, if you're going to put someone's name into a search engine, you're going to try to find them. The next thing you know, an hour has gone by. You
It's
pulled up
time.
all kinds of stuff. Oh, now you're looking at that trip that you really want to go on because now, or the next thing
Yeah.
you're shopping, because God knows we're doing that online now. So
Yeah.
that's why it's really a costly process for you as a potential employer to be doing someone's social media check. So that's one of our biggest products that we've launched probably about 4 years ago, and that has really taken off.
That is so important for kids to learn these days, that not to put something really, really stupid on a social media, only put the stuff people do want to see.
Absolutely.
Is there rules and regulation in place that to protect even the candidates or people who are applying for jobs? Is there something against that? Against that? Sorry, my phone just went. Is it against that? Some rules or regulation from an HR standpoint that we cannot look into this information, or is it all legal to look into all that information that we need to look at?
It's legal to look into it when you get consent. Again, we live in Canada, so we always have a candidate sign a release form, and the client checks off what kind of checks we're going to do. So the candidate knows that we're doing a social media check. So that's the first thing that we have to have in Canada is that consent. But then remember, we're only reporting on what's public information.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's where we're not crossing any legal lines. We're not going to go into the deep, dark archives of the internet and pull up stuff. It's only on what's public information. So that's critical for people to know. But you would be surprised at what we see that's public information, that's derogatory, negative, someone speaking about a former employer in a derogatory way, how much they can't stand going to work today. Well, that person, you bring that person into your workplace, and now that's going to become toxic. So it's really, that's why we're really seeing a lot of traction with the social media checks and why it's becoming so important.
Yeah, talk about the cost of hiring, every wrong hire that not only the numbers you given, I think the two numbers missing is the time business leaders or HR leaders invest to go through this process, and then the culture you're building, you bring in a wrong person in a culture, not you ruining a company culture as well, right? So then you have to go through the whole cycle process again. Interesting.
Absolutely. And it's very expensive to get somebody out. You look at how much time you spend recruiting, training, onboarding, like the whole thing. And now you have to replace that person again. It's just, it's such an important piece to make sure you get it right the first time and that you do your due diligence.
And especially on top of that is a training, so items you checking, some of those, somebody said derogatory stuff or, about the customer service or somebody, for the previous employer, that's something you can fix with a training later on. And if you're training the person and you find out later on, now you have wasted all the time, right? That you need to get, fix that before you hire, not after. You cannot fix those items after that.
Absolutely. And again, that's costing you, 213% of their salary, how much that's costing you as an employer. And then there's just the whole negative ramifications on the rest of the team and how that spills over. And, there's nothing better for a company when you've got the right people in the right seats and they like what they're doing. Your company's going to soar. But if you've got the wrong people in there and you've made a bad hire, it's just going to become toxic and it's going to cost you. Going to cost your bottom line in a very big way. Background checking is a very inexpensive thing to have done. That's the thing, right? People don't realize this is quick, hardly costs a lot of money, but the ramifications are huge.
I see. So let's talk about the candidates, the right candidates. They put the right information in, they have the right attitude, they should be hired. How does it benefit them? Because that, by doing all these checks that we talk about, that puts them on above all other candidates and not disclosing right information, right? So if somebody has the right mindset, they disclose all the right information, doesn't it provide advantage for those candidates that they're trying to do genuine work?
Absolutely. It's a huge advantage for them. They're going to move up to the top of the chain. As because of COVID, we can now we have a wider net where we can cast our search. We can, it's a wider net now. So it's going to become very competitive and you've got to get good people in. So absolutely. I mean, and a potential candidate's going to be looking to make sure that they have a proper background check done. They're probably not going to want to work for a company that's not going to go through some kind of due diligence to make sure, because it's all about your people. At the end of the day, it is all about your people and you've got to know who they are before you bring them in. That will just help to have a great team, cohesive environment.
Business is about people no matter what business you are, end of the day, right? So, without people, you can't move forward, you need but more importantly, you need the right people. Without the right people, you're not getting anywhere.
And you can't do it in a hurry either. That's the thing. Sometimes, we'll get these clients call, say, okay, I need to, we need to onboard Johnny by the end of the week. It's like, okay, well, we'll have you a criminal and a credit check done by the end of the week, but the rest of the stuff could take a couple of days. Mm-hmm. And, I understand as an employer, you need to fill that seat. But I think as an employer, you need to stop, take a breath, and take that extra time to make sure that due diligence is done right. So that once you get that right person in that seat, you don't have to hopefully go through this process, because it's hard on everybody to replace an employee. It's hard on your existing team. Culture is very important today. And I think that's going to be another takeaway after COVID. Culture is going to be really super important. And it's hard to create a culture when everybody's working remotely.
Yeah, so that's a challenge. Yeah, definitely.
That would be another whole podcast for you to do that. But so that's why I think it's really super important to get those right people in, so that you don't have to replace them, and you can build that culture and be the great place to work. You want to be on that 50 best places to work category list, right?
Yeah, that is one of the common mistakes, and I'm guilty of sometimes making that as well. Simply we hire people when we really need them, not ongoing basis, going through the recruiting process, right? So and have that that's common that we either grew as a company, or we have a space available in a company, so we're gonna go hire somebody. Considering that's one of the mistakes, what other mistakes you see in a market, or business leader, making constantly on an ongoing basis, or HR leaders making mistakes? What do you see the biggest mistakes?
Well, just kind of a segue to what you were just speaking about. The biggest advice that we give everybody is hire slowly, fire quickly. Mm-hmm. You really have to go slow when you're hiring, because of all the things that we talked about. And when you made a bad hire. Sometimes you don't know that. You can do all your due diligence to make sure you've got the right person in the right seat, and that's great. But until they get there, there could be personality things that come out that you're just finding that it's not the right fit. Now that becomes a bit of a challenge for your HR people, but that quickly. And I've always said that to companies. Yeah, you're doing your due diligence, you're doing the right thing, you're hiring slowly, you're taking the time. But if that culture's not right, when that person gets in, you got to let them go quickly and start over again. I would not recommend people wasting time. Well, we invested in this. Your gut knows if you've made a right hire. And if you haven't made that right hire, I highly recommend you cut the cord sooner than later. Hire slowly, fire quickly.
Yeah, it's fair to both sides, right? It's fair to your business as well, because you need to replace that talent right away. It's fair to candidate as well. They're not wasting their career and a company that the culture doesn't match, right?
That's right. It's good to release them sooner than later, because now they can find something that they're probably better suited for and a better fit. So, a lot of companies will say, oh, I invested this. It's like, no, just release them. If it's not the fit, for everybody's sake, for the candidate as well. Like if they're not happy, let them go.
Yeah. So especially in my industry, Marty, a lot of candidates we interview, they come from overseas, either India or China. How do we, and people apply for jobs, these universities, they graduated from the overseas, the company they work for the overseas. So how do we in Canada verify that information overseas, and what kind of information we are able to verify, considering their rules and regulation in their countries, whatever they have to comply to?
That's a good question. Because of COVID, we're becoming more global in our bandwidth that we can hire. So that's a great thing. Yeah. So what's important to do is we're also a global company. Obviously, we're a Canadian-based company. Our data is kept in Canada. We also can verify all the information in the US. So we have a US office, and then we have one in international, so that anybody coming from anywhere in the world will have the same background check process done as if you're hiring within Canada. Here's the big difference though. In the US, it's a little bit more complicated, because especially for criminal record information, it's public. So we have to go through a different process, and it takes a little bit longer. We're very fortunate in Canada. Criminal check results, that sort of stuff comes back, bang, bang, pretty quick. Yeah. In the US, it can take longer. Internationally, that bandwidth, depending on the country, every country in the world has a different process. Mm-hmm. Every country in the world has a different turnaround time. So what we tell employers to do in that case is do your due diligence. Do your background checks from those countries where the candidate is coming from. But you also may have to put in a job offer pending on background checks, because we've seen them taking up to 2 months to come back for a criminal check, say in India. And, depending on if they have to access court record information, a lot of those courts are closed right now because of COVID. So that's going to delay the process too. But I understand from an employer point of view, you need someone in that seat right away. So that's when the job offer that you put forward is very important, that you have an out on that, dependent on a background check coming clear. So absolutely, global hiring is fantastic. I think that will be our big takeaway after COVID, that we can hire from anywhere, but you still have to make sure you do your due diligence in the countries where the candidate is coming from.
Yeah, especially in my space, people had experience, and Microsoft could be in India, Microsoft could be in any part of the world. People putting experience in Microsoft. So we have to go verify wherever the countries of Microsoft offices and verify that that's where people work. It creates a lot of challenges for employers, and most of the time we don't have that much time to verify. We're simply say take it as a face value. Oh, the person mentioned, let's just take it, because you're not gonna have that much time to verify and go through all the that's why I think somebody needs to work with somebody like you to speed up the process.
And some of the times it's still going to take a long time, especially if we're looking to get record information out of some countries. There are some that are kind of notorious for being slow. But, if you protect yourself as an employer, and when you put that job offer in, it says, contingent on a background check coming back clear, so you can get rid of them. And that way you're kind of covering yourself as an employer.
I see.
And it helps everybody on your team within the company that knows that everybody's had a background check done. It just creates a culture of trust and it's a nice feeling. And, that's what's going to be really super important as we move forward after COVID, trying to make sure that we still have those great work environments and that people feel comfortable. And that will help them feel comfortable knowing that the proper due diligence was done and everybody's on the same playing field.
Yeah, for your team to know that, how much time and effort you put to hire the right person, I think is a great morale booster for your team as well, that, knowing that your employer puts that much time and effort to verify and make sure that, everybody who's coming to the team, the right people and adding to the team.
Absolutely, because everybody wants to be on that best place to work list, right? Like that's, that's just, you want to have that culture. You want to be that company that people want to work for.
Okay. So what are the few reasons that you see that, employers have, hesitant to work with or go through all that, the checks and balances before they hire somebody? So what are the reasons you get, or what is the hesitation most of the time that, what do you see in a market that people, trying to, bypass the checks and balances?
Usually when they're trying to bypass the checks and balances, their back is to the wall. Timing is critical, and they say, no, I can't make the time. I can't do this. I need to get this person in the seat right away. And you know what? You got to stop and you got to breathe, and you just got to say, okay, put that person in that seat. If you really need that, you need Johnny to start tomorrow, have Johnny start tomorrow. But know that in that contract, it's all about our contracts, that you can release Johnny if when his background check doesn't come back clear, you have an out. So don't feel the stress, because I understand that. And we hear that from our clients sometimes, especially when we're doing the international work and it's taking a little bit longer to verify information. And we work with our clients and we just say, listen, guys, you just got to be patient on this one. You got to do your due diligence, and it's going to take time depending on the country.
I see. So what you're saying is you put a clause in a contract simply saying, if there's something doesn't go right with the checks and balances we're going to do later on, you could have cancel the employment.
That's right, my friend. That's really important. It's all about those contracts, right? So that's where you got a good HR lawyer looking at them, making sure everything's tickety-boo, and you've got to have that out. Especially when you're doing the international work, because like in Canada, come on, it takes a couple of, like an hour or two to get a criminal check back in Canada. But in the US, depending on what kind you're going to have done, and internationally, we've seen it take weeks. So at that point, you could, even if you need to get that person in that seat, fill it, but make sure you have it in that contract that you can have an out.
I see. So a lot of business leaders I've been talking to, Marty, they're all in a position, they're all preparing for it. As soon as the COVID, we go back to offices, they need to rush to scale up the revenue that they missed for quite some, like either that, or they have a new way of delivering services and product because that's what COVID changed, and we're gonna need more people. So we need to scale up in a HR side of things, right? So, or the company simply, especially Toronto being a tech hub, we're growing as an economy, so people get, they're gonna rush to hiring process. So what would you recommend these business owners do that they're planning to scaling their business very fast after COVID settles down a little bit? What would you recommend that they start doing now? Something they can do now, or they can prepare themselves when the time comes, they can simply easily scale up.
Absolutely. That's a good point. So it's really super important that they know what kind of checks they're going to have done for the candidate.
Mm-hmm.
So know what you want to have done. You can scale quickly if you're just going to be doing the typical, which is a criminal, credit, education, and employment verification. That stuff doesn't take a lot of time. Just be ready for that. Make sure that, you've got your account set up, you're ready to go. And once these people come in, you can turn them around pretty quick. We turn that stuff around really fast if you're in Canada. So to be ready, have the account set up. And I think when you're in the interview process, it's really important for the person who's doing the hiring to have that conversation with the candidate, the potential candidate, and tell them what they're going to expect.
Mm-hmm.
So, this is what's going to happen in the process. So just be crystal clear with your candidate, what's going to happen and what their expectation is of that candidate. So when you get the email link telling you that you're going to have a background check, just make sure they're aware of that. So it doesn't go to their spam or they're watching for it or whatever, because that can delay a process too. If a company hasn't told a candidate that they're going to be going through a background check, remember, it's going to come from an info@brittonmanagement.com. They might just think of it as spam and discard it. Yeah. So it's really super important to communicate that to your candidates that, hey, this is what we're going to be doing. You're going to be getting an email from this, watch for it, whatever. That's sometimes the problem that we find takes a little bit longer because candidates don't know. The client has perhaps not communicated what to expect in the next stage of the journey. But if they tell them exactly what's going to happen, then the candidate is going to be watching for it. They'll hopefully, it won't go to their spam or their junk, because honestly, we've seen that happen. And it's really unfortunate for a client because they might lose a candidate because it's sitting in their junk folder and they've never looked at it. And that is something that you can't help unless you tell the candidate to expect an email.
I see.
To do that. So I just think the communication piece is really important there for you to just keep that in mind with the candidate so that they know what they're going to be expected to do to land that job. And that will just make it go smoothly, more quickly. And, you're right. I think it's going to be like the roaring 20s once this is all over and the world starts to reopen, and just think about travel and all that. I mean, it's going to be crazy. I sure hope so anyway, that it's just going to be so electric and fun. People just have to be ready for it and have the right processes in place.
Yeah, and that's when you make the biggest mistake when you try to hire so fast, as you mentioned, right? You're trying to build, you're trying to rush because you need to deliver services, you're growing. That's when you make most of the mistakes, because you're not trying to rush into the hiring process. So,
that's right. And you know how much it costs to replace someone, right? It's like 213% of their salary. So you got to slow down and do it right.
Yeah. And some businesses, they build a bench, for certain skill set. We do that for our level one skill set as well. Is it possible to do all the checks and balances before you build a bench? For your, if you have a turnover on certain roles a lot, you want to make sure that you have enough pipeline. So when the position available, you can go to those pool and solicit. Okay, who's available, and I can take. When people, you're filtering those people, is it possible to do checks and balances at that time as well, or you only want to do when you are ready to take on somebody on a team?
Where we step in as a background check, a pre-employment screening is what we're called. You've already selected the candidate. So they've gone through all the testing, the aptitude testing and all that stuff before that. Now they've been shortlisted, and that's typically when a client gives that candidate over to us. They've done the checks and balances in terms of the technical capabilities of the job. They know they're qualified, blah, blah, all that other stuff. And then they give them to us. Yeah. We're kind of the last part of that whole recruiting stage. Now they've got the person, and now they're ready to go. And then that's where we come in. We're usually the final leg of the hiring process.
I guess.
And that's why it's important to know. It's important for us to communicate to our clients when we're hiring outside of Canada, when we're talking US or international, that I know you've got the candidate, you're ready to go, but these things, you've got to be patient. You've got to be patient for some of them, and they will take time.
Yeah,
Canada's not a problem. Canada's not a problem. I mean, sometimes education can take 2 or 3 days, especially if the candidate has a name that's like John Smith.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to have to search and make sure we've got the right John Smith. So it might take 2 to 3 days in Canada, and education can sometimes delay that process a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But of all the job candidates that misrepresent themselves, education is one of the highest things.
Yeah. Yeah, if you providing service to any sector in Canada, I mean, for you to have all your people that they already gone through checks and balances and presenting that to that future clients that and when you talk to them, simply saying, hey, listen, I have all that, all my staff has gone through all the checks and balances. That definitely built that brand for yourself as also a little bit confident in a prospect's mind as well. That hey, all the people that are going to be serving your business are the right people.
Absolutely. Because it's all about the people that you hire, and they're going to make or break your company. So you really, again, going back to that, I can't stress it enough. You've got to just take your time and do the right job.
Interesting. And that is very tempting when you have a right person, and waiting or just taking them on and trying to get a work out of the person. I think that's where you got to find a balance and slow it down a little bit.
You got to slow it down. And you also, you can do all the checks and balances and you can do all your due diligence. But at the end of the day, you really also have to listen to your gut.
Yeah.
You know what, you can kind of get a sense, and some people will say, oh, I kind of picked that up in the interview, but I just listen carefully to your gut, because it's usually not wrong.
Yeah, very often. Yeah, every time I personally find every time I don't listen, I make mistakes. So you just gotta learn to listen. Okay,
learn to listen.
Very, very interesting. So where do you see your organization, hopefully COVID's settling down, the numbers going a little bit down, as we coming back, where do you see your organization going and what's ahead of your path, Britton?
So we see us really taking off in terms of the ID verification stage. I think that's going to become like kind of a post-pandemic sort of thing, because we just become so, remote, everything is remote. Okay. I see that really taking off for us. Technology is going to be our key as well, implementing, new technologies that's going to help streamline processes. That's been, I think, a good thing with COVID too, because it's given business owners an opportunity to sit back and look at their overall operations and take that chance to improve where you can. So that's going to be our big thing. Just, see where we can make improvements, which technology we can use, which APIs we can integrating with different applicant tracking systems like Workday and things like that. Partners are huge for us. That allows business to grow and scale is by having the right partners. So we're really, that's given us, again, COVID has given us a blessing of time to do those research of partners and where we think that we would want to, who we want to partner with that will allow us to scale and better service our customers.
I see. Is scaling part of your path as well? And you guys planning to scale up? Where are you guys going with the business side of things?
Yeah, we're going into a growth mode right now. And again, it's the APIs and the technology that's going to allow us to do that, to offer different things while still keeping true to our roots in terms of the reference checking piece, where we're still, picking up the phone. We're not using call centers for certain things. So we're still staying true to those roots for sure. But yeah, I see that being a big change for us going forward. It's all going to be about the technology and your partners.
Yeah, very interesting. Especially the companies going through the growth mode. I know everybody's pushing. Once this settles down, COVID, everybody's going to push for the growth that they got revenue we missed. And I think what you provide is so important for business. Anybody business leader who are listening to this podcast or I would strongly recommend that have a chat with you and take a look. And every mistake, the cost you mentioned, that's a huge cost for every mistake we make in a business. And, HR mistakes are the biggest mistake we make. Other mistakes you can easily deal with, technology mistake or any other mistake, because the HR finding the wrong person in your team, it brings down the morale and also the cost associated with it. It's just such a big cost.
Absolutely. And it's about operations. Your company can't shine. You can't operate fully if you've got the wrong people in the wrong seat. So really, really companies just have to, and I'm really, like I said, I think we're going to be the roaring 20s after this when we start to reopen, and the world is just going to be, it's going to be such an exciting place. But again, just slow it down, take your time, and make sure you always do your due diligence.
I make that mistake. I speed up every time we grow, and I speed up hiring people. I think I'm guilty of that, and a lot of business owners, they do that. But that definitely listen to some experts and slow it down a little bit, and take your time when hiring process.
Yeah, and remember this: hire slowly, fire quickly. If you know as an employer you made the wrong hire, don't spend months trying to work. Like just cut the cord and do it. Just get the right person in the right seat, and then as a business, you'll grow and you'll scale, and you'll be in great shape. Good
stuff. Well, I learned so much from our discussion, Marty. Thank you so much for your time. And
it's my pleasure.
Business leaders, they need to see this perspective, and they need to go through this and learn from it. And I definitely, you give me a totally different perspective when a hiring process. I definitely got to go do more checks and balances when I'm hiring.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here today, and thank you very much for the opportunity to have this chat. It was really enjoyable.
Thank you so much, Anne.
Okay.
Okay, have a good one. Bye-bye.
Yeah, you too. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.